Who are the people of the Most High? Israelites.
Hey brothers, Shalom. Brakatah Yahweh Yahushai, Brakatah Yahweh Yahushai, the water Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. Here, Brother Elder Ayathan filming, and we were talking about Alexander the Greek and basically his relationship with the Israelites. And we know in the Apocrypha where it says how evils was multiplied, but this happened after the death of Alexander the Great. Because see, Alexander the Great didn't ride down on Jerusalem. You know, we got all this noise in the background, but he didn't come and ride down on Jerusalem when he came into the city. He was actually greeted with respect, and he greeted the high priest with respect. And that's in the history. You have to go into the Josephus. So I'm going to read an excerpt from the Josephus Antiquity of the Jews, book 11, what is it, chapter 8, and I'm going to start about like the fourth paragraph 4. So, and I'm actually jump right to it, because we'll be out here reading all day because there's so much in the Josephus to read. Okay, so it starts here in where Alexander the Greek, it says here, I'm going to the middle of paragraph 4. It says, so when Alexander had perceived him kindly, Sanballat, and later on in history, when you read on, this guy Sanballat was actually a Persian who actually wanted to build a temple and take the high priest brother and make the high priest brother the priest of that temple, so that way Sanballat's sister could marry him, so that way they could say that they're Israelites. Basically, that's what was going on here. So when Alexander had received him kindly, Sanballat thereupon took courage and spake to him about his present affair. He told him that he had a son-in-law, Manasseh, who was brother to the high priest Jaddua, and that there were many others of his own nation now with him that were desirous to have a temple in the places subject to him, that it would be for the king's advantage to have the strength of the Jews divided into 2 parts, lest when the nation is of one mind and united upon any attempt for invocation, it proved troublesome to kings, as it had formerly proved to the kings of Assyria. Whereupon Alexander gave Sanballat leave to do so, who used the utmost diligence and built the temple and made Manasseh the priest, and deemed it a great reward that his daughter's children should have that dignity. But when the 7 months of the siege of Tyre were over, because Alexander at the time was running the siege over Tyre and Sidon, and he took control of Tyre and Sidon, that's right there along the coast in Israel. He took control of Tyre and Sidon. And it says, and the 2 months of the siege of Gaza, Sanballat died. Now Alexander, when he had taken Gaza, made haste to go up to Jerusalem, and Jaddua the high priest, when he heard that, was in agony and under terror, as not knowing how he should meet the Macedonians, since the king was displeased at the foregoing disobedience. Because prior to what we read here, and you go above, it's a lot of reading, that's why I just didn't read it, but you can go and read it for yourself. Alexander sent word to Jaddua the high priest and said, listen, I know you made a league with Darius, right, to give him rations and give him soldiers. Send the rations, the food, send the food to me, and send the soldiers to me, and I'll basically make a league with you. And Jaddua the high priest replied back to Alexander through a messenger, listen, I promised Darius that I would not go against him while he was in the land of the living. So he couldn't honor what Alexander was asking him. So then Alexander the Greek was pissed off, and he was making his way to go to Jerusalem, but he stopped in Tyre and Sidon and Gaza over there, and he had a war campaign going on there to take control of that area. Then he was headed straight to Jerusalem. So now he's on his way to Jerusalem to go deal with the high priest. So basically the priest, Jaddua, the high priest, was shook. Okay, so the high priest was shook. So it says, since the king was displeased at the foregoing disobedience, he therefore ordained that the people should make supplications and should join with him in offering sacrifice to Yahweh, whom he besought to protect the nation and to deliver them from the perils that were coming upon them. Whereupon Yahweh warned him in a dream, which came upon him after he had offered sacrifice, that he should take courage. He told him, don't be afraid. Don't be shook of Alexander. Take courage and adorn the city and open the gates, that the rest should appear in white garments, but that he and the priests should meet the king in the habits proper to their order, without the dread of any ill consequences, which the providence of Yahweh would prevent. Upon which, when he rose from his sleep, he greatly rejoiced and declared to all the warning he had received from Yahweh, according to which dream he acted entirely, and so waited for the coming of the king. So he woke from the dream that the Most High gave him, and he told the other priests about the dream, and basically he wasn't alarmed no more, because the Most High told him, look, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. Open the gates to the city and let them come in. So now this is the 5th paragraph. And then I'm going to hit some scriptures, but I'm building up to it. It says, and when he understood that he was not far from the city, he went out in procession with the priests and the multitude of the citizens. The procession was venerable, and the manner of it different from that of other nations. It reached to a place called Sapha, which name translated into Greek signifies a prospect. For you have thence a prospect both of Jerusalem and of the temple. And when the Phoenicians and the Chaldeans that followed him thought they should have liberty to plunder the city, so the Phoenicians and the Chaldeans that followed Alexander and that were a part of his army, they were like, okay, good, we're going to get to plunder the Jews, and we're going to torture the high priest and all the other priests. So that's what they thought was about to go down, right? It says that they thought to have liberty to plunder the city and torment the high priest to death, which the king's displeasure fairly promised them. The very reverse of it happened. See, so they thought they was getting ready to go burn down Jerusalem, right? And torture and torment the high priest to death. But the very opposite happened, right? So it says, for Alexander, when he saw the multitude at the distance in white garments, while the priest stood clothed with fine linen, and the high priest in purple and scarlet clothing, with his mitre on his head, having the golden plate whereupon the name of Yahweh was engraved, he approached by himself and adored the name. So Alexander seen the name of Yahweh, and he adored the name Yahweh, and he approached, right? And first saluted the high priest. So Alexander the Greek went to the high priest and he saluted the high priest. The Jews also did all together with one voice salute Alexander. So Alexander saluted Jaddua the high priest, and then the other priests under him in one accord saluted Alexander the Greek, and encompassed him about, whereupon the kings of Syria and the rest were surprised at what Alexander had done, and supposed him disordered in his mind. So they was like, is something going on with Alexander? Is he demented in his mind? We came here to pillage, plunder, and torture the priests and burn the city down, and he's sitting here saluting them? So they looking at Alexander like, is something wrong with him mentally? The men that were with him, right? It says, however, Parmenio alone went up to him and asked him how it came to pass that when all the others adored him, he should adore the high priest of the Jews, to whom he replied. So he told his man, so Alexander says back to his man, I did not adore him, but that Yahweh, who hath honored him with his high priesthood. For I saw this very person in a dream, in this very habitat, when I was at Dios in Macedonia, who, when I was considering with myself how I might obtain the dominion of Asia, exhorted me to make no delay, but boldly to pass over the sea thither, for that he would conduct my army and would give me the dominion over the Persians, which is that, whence is that? Having seen no other in that habit, and now seeing this person in it, and remembering that vision, and the exhortation which I had in my dream, I believe that I bring this army under the divine conduct, and shall therewith conquer Darius, and destroy the power of the Persians. So Alexander said, listen, I had a dream with this very man in it, and that the Yahweh said that, look, I was going to be given the dominion over the Persians, over Darius. And this man told me. So Alexander had a dream himself that the Most High sent him. And that's why he didn't attack the high priest. He didn't pillage and burn down Jerusalem. They didn't torture the priests. They didn't rob the temple. He went in there and paid homage and showed respect. See, this is in the history. This is in the Josephus. It says, and that all things will succeed according to what is in my mind. And when he had said this to Parmenio and had given the high priest his right hand, the priest ran along by him, and he came into the city. And he went up into the temple. He offered sacrifice to Yahweh. So they showed him how to make a correct sacrifice to the name of Yahweh. It says, according to the high priest's direction, and magnificently treated both the high priest and the priests. And when the book of Daniel was showed him, wherein Daniel declared that one of the Greeks should destroy the empire of the Persians, which that's Daniel's the 8th chapter. In Daniel's the 8th chapter, it talks about the rough goat, which is the king of Grecia. How he was going to take down the Persians. Well, it was known as the Medo-Persian Empire, but the Persians were the stronger of the two. So he took down the Persian Empire. So they opened the book of Daniel and they showed him in Daniel the 8th chapter, this is talking about you, Alexander. Just like in his dream, the Most High sent him. That's exactly how it went down. They showed him in the book of Daniel, which is Daniel's the 8th chapter. So maybe I should just go there and get the book of Daniel 8 real quick and just read a portion of it. So let me pull up Daniel's the 8th chapter. Bear with me one moment. I'm almost there. Almost there. Here we go. Daniel 8. Just going to touch on it. Okay. Daniel's 8:1. I'm gonna just read a little bit of it and then go back to the into the history. And in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw that I was at Shushan in the place, in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. Elam, oh, those are the Persians, the East Indians. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Uliah. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. That's talking about the Medo-Persian Empire. That's what that's talking about. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. That notable horn between the he-goat's eyes, that was Alexander the Greek. Because his father, Philip the Macedonian, was the predecessor. But then Alexander was the horn that was right in the middle of the he-goat's head. That was Alexander. It says, and touched not the ground, and the he-goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which was the Medo-Persian Empire, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns. He took down the Medo-Persians. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very strong, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. Because Alexander, 12 years he reigned, he conquered, he died. So it was broken. The great horn was broken. And for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven, which his is 4 generals: Ptolemy, Cassander, Seleucus, and Lacemaicus. So that was just to give you a brief understanding of what we were reading here about when the priest showed him in the book of Daniel. This is talking about you. That's what they took him to. They took him to Daniel's the 8th chapter, and they broke it down to him and said, that's you, Alexander. So I'm going to go back into Josephus and read about Alexander. So I'm back in Antiquity of the Jews, book 11, chapter 8, Section, I believe I was in section, there's so much reading, section 5. So let me get back to where I was at. Okay. He conquered the Persians, so we're right here. He offered the sacrifice. Right, it says, and when the books of Daniel were showed him, wherein Daniel declared that one of the Greeks should destroy the empire of the Persians, he supposed that himself was that person intended, like we just read. And as he was then glad, he dismissed the multitude for the present. But the next day he called them to him and bid them ask what favors they pleased of him, whereupon the high priest desired that they might enjoy the laws of their forefathers and might pay no tribute on the 7th year. So he said, listen, what favors do you want of me? He said to the priest, what favors do you need of me? So not only did Alexander come and salute the priest, he went and offered a sacrifice to Yahweh. He saluted the priest. He offered a sacrifice to Yahweh, right? He also said, look, tell me what favors you need of me. He didn't come and ransack the temple and destroy the temple and kill the high priest and do all that. Alexander came with respect. So then he said, listen, this is what I'll do for you. What you need, what favors do you need from me? So this is how Alexander dealt with our people, right? The bullshit happened after his death, like it says in the Apocrypha, and I'll probably get a chance to touch on that later. It says, okay, so the priest had said to him, basically, about the Israelites that are far off, we want them to be able to enjoy the laws of our forefathers and might pay no tribute on the 7th year. He granted all they desired. So Alexander said, okay, you got that. So any Israelites that are scattered in Persia or scattered in Babylon, this and that, they can worship the Yahweh freely, and then they don't have to pay no taxes. Then he says he granted all they desire. And when they entreated him that he would permit the Jews in Babylon and Media to enjoy their own laws, also he willingly promised to do hereafter what they desired. And when he said to the multitude that if any of them would enlist themselves in his army, so Alexander said, if any Jews enlist in the army under me, with me, on this condition that they should continue under the laws of their forefathers and live according to them. So any Jews who join my army right now, they can enjoy the same privilege. They can still worship the Most High freely while they're in my army under me. They don't have to follow the Greek gods. In other words, they weren't Hellenized. Okay? It says, so that in Acts the 2nd chapter, when it talks about Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven, right? They knew that they were Jews, but they were just living in other lands. All right? So now he says this, that if any would enlist themselves in his army on this condition, that they should continue under the laws of their forefathers and live according to them. He was willing to take them with him. Many were ready to accompany him in his wars. So there were many Jews that joined Alexander's ranks and fought in the wars along with the Greeks, and they didn't have to become Hellenized, and they were still speaking the Hebrew. Of course, you know, they had to pick up some Greek because they were amongst them. They had to pick up some Greek amongst them. You know, they had to trade amongst them. You're not going to go to be amongst a group of people and you're going to have to assimilate somewhat, but they didn't have to. All right. So now it says, so when Alexander had thus settled matters at Jerusalem, he led his army into the neighboring cities, and when all the inhabitants to whom he came received him with great kindness, the Samaritans, now these dirty, low-life, goddamn Samaritans, right, who had then Shechem for their metropolis, a city-state at Mount Gerizim, and inhabited by apostates of the Jewish nation. Apostates were Jews who were accused of murder or something like that, and then they ran to Samaria, which was like a defense city, where they could go there and they wouldn't receive the judgment that they was going to receive in Jerusalem, Galilee, or wherever. So Samaria was always set up as one of those cities that you can run away to until they found out what actually happened, in case the family member wanted to take vengeance on them. So that's where those apostate Jews had went into Samaria. So it says that Seeing that Alexander has so greatly honored the Jews, determined to profess. So the Samaritans, it says they determined to profess themselves Jews. They said, look, we're Jews too. Now remember in John, right, the 4th chapter, for the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Why? Because the Samaritans were not Jews. When you go back to in the 2 Kings, the 17th chapter, this is going back into the history, it tells you that there were men from Babylon, men from Ava, men from Kutha. Kutha are Persians. Men from Babylon, men from Ava, men from Kutha, men from Hamath. The people from Hamath, those were Hamites. And Sepharvim. Right? Sepharvim and Ava, I believe, were 2 places in Syria. 2 unidentified places in Syria. So you had men from Babylon, which were Cushites, right? Men from Babylon, men from Kutha, which were Persians, men from Hamath, which were Canaanites, and then you had Ava and Sepharvim, which are 2 unidentified areas that's in the land of Syria that were brought in 2 Kings, the 17th chapter. They're not Jews. So now when they heard about the deal that Alexander made with us, they ran up and said, listen, Alexander, we want that same deal because, hey, we're Jews too. Now watch what Alexander says to these knuckleheads, right? It says, seeing that Alexander has so greatly honored the Jews, determined to profess themselves Jews, for such is the disposition of the Samaritans. As we have already elsewhere declared that when the Jews are in adversity, they deny that they are of kin to them, and then they confess the truth. But when they perceive that some good fortune hath befallen them, they immediately pretend to have communion with them. For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. When the woman said, wait a minute, you being a Jew, for the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. John the 4th chapter. That's why. Because the Samaritans weren't Jews. They were scumbags. So that's right there in the history. So they were trying to tell Alexander, look, we want that deal too. So watch what Alexander tells these Samaritans. It says, they deny that they are kin to them, and then they confess the truth. But when they perceive that some good fortune hath befallen them, they immediately pretend to have communion with them, saying that they belong to them, and derive their genealogy from the posterity of Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh. Accordingly, they made their address to the king with splendor, and showed great alacrity in meeting him at a little distance from Jerusalem. And when Alexander had commended them, the Sichemites approached to him, taking with them the troops that Sanballat had sent him. And they desired that he would come to their city and do honor to their temple also, to whom he promised, that when he returned, he would come to them. And when they petitioned that he would remit the tribute of the 7th year to them, because they did but so thereon, he asked who they were and made such a petition. And when they said that they were Hebrews, but had the name of Sidonians, name of Hamites, living in Shechem, he asked them again whether they were Jews. And when they said they were not Jews, it was to the Jews, he said, that I granted that privilege. However, when I return and am thoroughly informed by you of this matter, I will do what I shall think proper. In other words, you're not getting the deal that I cut with Jehoiada the high priest and with the Jews. You're not getting that deal because you're not Jews. So that's what Alexander told those Samaritans. That's who he was talking to. But now I'm gonna I'm gonna touch on Maccabees, the 1st chapter, and end it off here, because there's a lot of reading in the history. Went into Daniel's, and we read Daniel's about when the priests told them that, look, this is you. So Maccabees 1:1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and the Medes, and that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece, and made many wars and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth, and went through the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him. Whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. He gathered a mighty strong host, and ruled over the countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. We didn't have to be tributaries unto him, as we read in the history. Wherefore he called his servants such as were honorable, and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then he died. And those servants that was Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus. And his servants bear rule, everyone in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years. And evils were multiplied in the earth. This happened after the death of Alexander. But while Alexander was on the scene, he dealt righteously with the Jews. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about and what I wanted to cover. And I'd like to say, Tawada, Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. And I hope you brothers learned something off of this lesson. Didn't try to make it too long, but sometimes I'm long-winded. And I want to say Shalom.